Hey, it's Kevin Lyman from the Vans Warped Tour. You're watching The Spotlight on rockstardreams.com. I kind of fell into this business, and I think a lot of us sometimes did. You know, it was in school, you know, I believe in the education process, but college was like a strange thing to me. You know, it was just I wasn't grasping onto anything as like something I had to do. And I was walking through campus and heard some music in the distance, and I walked over, and a bunch of guys were setting up a PA system, and I think that first band on campus was TSOL. I was going to school at Cal Poly Pomona. It was a strange group of guys over there. It was turned into Perry Tollett, who runs the Glass House, Paul Tollett, who now founded Coachella, Skip Page, who works with him. All of us were going to school together at that time, and we kind of found our love of music. And I would travel into Los Angeles. I had a van. That was the coolest thing. I had this Buccaneer, it was called. You know, 6 bucket seats, big 8-track player.
Waterbed.
Waterbed. It was just, you know, we were jamming the Knack. I just forget and remember the Knack. Remember My Sharona, like big song. Like we'd drive it, and we kind of we were more maybe probably new wave, but we'd start going in and running it, going to shows. Like every Thursday night, the Plimsolls would play, and the Go-Go's would be playing, and then the On Club with the Untouchables. And so I kind of fell in love with live music, and then I went off to Hawaii after graduation. I had an opportunity to run a weight loss camp for girls over in Hawaii, and it was still that non-serious kind of like, what am I going to do? I'm going to go to Hawaii. You know, naturally what you're going to do after college, after 4 years, is just go run a weight loss camp in Hawaii. The motto there was strange. It was lose weight, get a date, get a tan, get a man. It was like, you know, it was like this funny situation over there. I came back pretty much broke. Like I was going to probably run a summer camp. You know, I was running summer camps. I was running youth programs. And someone said, hey, Kevin, remember all those shows you helped put on in college? Why don't you come out? Fender's Ballroom, which was in Long Beach. It was eventually burned down by the neighbor with a Molotov cocktail. But it was, they said, come over here. You know, it was paying $75 a night to stage manage shows for a company called High Times Events. And this woman was Marcel Brumel, who was basically burning through her husband's trucking fortune, putting on concerts, was booking bands like Lone Justice and the Blasters and things like that. And I started working in the club. And Golden Voice was also doing shows in there. And by that point, Paul Tollett had gone to work for Golden Voice, and there was a co-promote at Fender's, Motorhead actually playing at Fender's. And I got to do the production on it. And at that point, mostly production at the Golden Voice world was run by the Fist. It's pretty violent times around punk rock at that point. So their crew was great guys, but you know, really they didn't pay attention to, you know, technical needs of bands and things. It was more like show up, play. We're more here to make sure you don't get your asses kicked. And then the Motorhead guys showed up, and they still, you know, they had a technical writer, and I actually fulfilled what was on the rider. Golden Voice was starting to become a company that was getting a little bit more well-known acts. They were still doing all the underground punk acts, and I got to work with, you know, with Circle Jerks, Dickies, Fear. You know, those were the bands we were doing on a regular basis. But that was kind of that world that was starting to transition, and they were picking up more shows, and the agency system came up, and there was writers to be attended to, and I was a guy who actually, you know, kind of followed them to the best of my ability to make sure everything was there, to make sure the bands had good shows. You know, I wasn't even the green. It was just having a PA system with like microphones, you know, sometimes. And so I worked my way, and I was at that point kind of worked my way in with Golden Voice. But I kept my company separate. I formed Kevin Lyman Production Services because I was working for multiple promoters at the time, which I've always been. I was always independent fairly in my entire career. And I just started doing more and more shows and getting a good reputation. And some of those bands started to progress to be the Red Hot Chili Peppers and the Jane's Addictions and Fishbones and those kind of bands. And I started, you know, just started doing more. And at one point, you know, I lived out in Claremont, which was east of Los Angeles. It was kind of a hippie town. It was known for more of the colleges there. And I started looking at all the hippies I hung out with. Kind of were the same thing as punkers in a lot of ways. You know, punkers and hippies are very similar. They just had different ways to express their message, you know, and later on in life, you know, as I got more into the rap world, you know, they were expressing their frustrations in the way that they grew up with, the same frustrations we might have as a hippie in Claremont because they wouldn't let you do this, and then the punkers were the suburban punks. So I kind of started doing these shows and really, but also really realizing I didn't want to do it forever. You know, I didn't want to be in that club. I didn't want to become that person. I always say that guy, you know, we could be that woman, that guy, and you know, you got to be political correct with everything. But it was that guy at that point. You didn't want to be that person just bumming people out. Everyone knows that guy in venues. You know, you go to the box office, they're mean, or there's always someone bumming your night out at a show. And it usually means they've been there too long, in my opinion. Why are you bumming my night out? I'm here to hear music, which touches my heart, and I'm so fired up, and you're making my night not as stoked as I want to be. And so I kept doing that and working, and I still lived in Claremont, so there was always this grounding. I was going into Hollywood up to 320 days a year, and it was an hour from LA out to Claremont, and I had some grounding out there. So now I read all the books. You know, I read the Motley Crue books, because I was also a guy that worked every show possible. I loved punk, and there was this world that would only work in punk, but I was working in metal. I was working, Persian Thanksgiving dinners. I was working, in the Latin scene. So I think a lot of my basis of my shows now that have been known to be eclectic, have influences of music from all over, kind of got the basis back then. I got my foundation of having an open mind to music, and now I read all the books, and I could go, oh, I know exactly when Anthony Kiedis was trying to score drugs, and I thought he really did have a sore throat and wasn't singing, and we dragged kids out of the crowd. I was pretty naive actually during that period, or Axl Rose passed out in the alley. I found myself working 320 shows a year, so I gave up a lot of those things to keep. I was working when everyone else was having fun. That became my socialization, though. It was the only time I was ever social. It's harder to be social now, but that was my socialization. 329 a year, I had to run shows, and I was doing everything from the Fender's Ballroom to the Palladium to the Palace to the Roxy, Whiskey. So many venues that don't exist anymore. Now you drive downtown LA and all those theaters. And we used to actually pay the guy $200 to let us in a theater, and we'd do an underground Chili Pepper show, and we'd rent space. We'd give the guy $50 to let us there was no marquee, and at the porn movie theater, we'd put up Chili Peppers next door. So we were doing a lot of things that no one did, and then that kind of worked through, and you got a reputation, and that reputation wasn't like I wasn't kissing anyone's ass. I was just working. And I found out later in life, some of the people who hired me, like the Stone Temple Pilots, were like, I go, why did you hire me? There were so many people that were probably more technical and better than me. They go, because you were just kind of cool to us when we were nobody. You helped us with our gear. You helped us with our stage. You gave us a pizza one night. I didn't remember. I was just working. And then I got this reputation. So in 1991, we were doing so many shows. And 7 nights of Jane's Addiction at the Palladium, 6 nights of the Ramones at John Anson Ford Theater, and there was the idea of Lollapalooza, and I was asked to be the first stage manager of Lollapalooza in 1991, and I'd never been on the road. So it's funny, the only night I'd ever been on the road was probably the night I should have probably been the end of my life on the road. I went up with the Untouchables and Fishbone and Trouble Funk, a great band out of D.C., the go-go era. And we did a show at the Circle Theater in San Jose, the Circle Stars Theater. And I couldn't drive at night. I was a bad night driver. It was all these things were happening in my life, but I went back and worked in the clubs. And then I got to go on Lollapalooza in 1991. And that was an adventure for me. We were doing stuff that no one else was doing. When I go to these big union venues, some of the old union guys go, I remember when you were that kid out here just breaking every rule, doing stuff. But we kind of liked you. We didn't kick your ass because we kind of liked you, and didn't threaten you to beating you up, and we did stuff different. And, kept doing working. And then in 95, I was pretty much thinking about getting out of the business. It was time. I had my first daughter coming, and maybe it was time to get that job where you actually had health insurance, you had those kind of things. And it was my last thing was going to be a thing that became the Warped Tour. Originally, it wasn't going to be called the Warped Tour. It was going to be called the Bomb. Remember that term, the Bomb? It was like the bomb this, the bomb that. Well, the Oklahoma City bombing happened the day we were going to announce it. And I think if you think about that first year, it would have been the bomb bombed because it wasn't successful. I was still figuring it out. Terminally unemployable. I have to do stuff on my own every day. Kind of make it work.
If you had a couple mentors, you could look back and say, wow, this person really influenced me. Who would they be?
My first exposure to a real promoter was Bill Graham up in and we were selling egg rolls at the Grateful Dead park lot. There was a guy named Paul Irwin, Santa we call him, and he was living in a milk truck in front of my house in Claremont. Basically, it was an old milk truck. Well, I think we had one of the first, if you actually look, we had one of the first food trucks in probably all of California. Bill Graham was, it was one of those people you watched from afar in some ways. I got to meet him a little more closer when I was stage managing Lollapalooza that first year. I watched how he handled Ice-T and his posse, you know, straight on. When they were, it wasn't Ice-T, it was his posse. It was causing a little trouble at one of his events, and he just dealt with it. So I've always respected the way he worked, and had come crossed with him. And you know, later on in my life, some people have actually mentioned me in the same breath with him has been kind of awesome. You know, you know, other mentors I would say Bill Silva. Bill Silva's been a promoter for some time out of San Diego, manager. I work on Music Cares with him, but I think he handles his life with a class and dignity. He's managed it, and I think in this big business, kind of keeping the majority of your integrity is really important. Is a great achievement, because we do work in a business where, you know, Hunter S. Thompson, as we were talking about earlier, had so many great quotes about the music industry, and I don't think he's that far off in any ways. You know, I feel that, you know, I was about ready to leave the business a couple of years ago. I was about ready to get out, and I was just burnt. And my wife said, "You can't leave now." Who's been very vocal about me leaving at other times. She says, "You know what? You've preached to these kids about, you know, the business is changing in a way. They are taking over. A lot of these younger people are, you know, it's about making a nice living. It's not about front row Laker tickets or living in the Hollywood Hills or who you could fuck this day or that day. It's still there." They're still, but it's shrinking. Their worlds are shrinking, and now you see just a bunch of young, hardworking people that want to be around music. You know, I've always said that, you know, yeah, I've made a better living than I ever imagined in my life. I have, especially, you know, if you knew me back when I was 19 and 20. I know, but I always say I haven't taken advantage of a scene. You know, some people might argue that, but I really haven't, because punk rock would have never allowed you to take advantage of it. I've been able to exist in this world, you know, like Fat Mike or Brett Gurewitz from Epitaph. You know, I look up, even though we're very close, and I look up to the way he's lived his life. And what's wrong with being able to do what we've done for as long as we have? I think punk rock wouldn't have allowed you if you were taking advantage of it. And I've seen people when I've dabbled in other musics. You know, metal was very happy to have us come over there with Mayhem and things for some time. So, you know, I think, you know, getting out is going to be an interesting. You have to know when it's time to get out. I've watched people hold on too long. So there's some few things you can only do, but I enjoy doing so many other things. You know, I do a lot of teaching now. I'm starting to do more writing. You know, I was involved with a brewery, the St. Archer Project. I'm working on a bamboo toothbrush company. Some of the environmental things, that old hippie is coming out, that we're working in a little bit. So I'm enjoying doing that, but I always think music is a great thing. I still love listening to great songs. I watch it, and I don't judge it. And I think that's the problem, that people start judging the younger generations of music. You know, it's funny how people go, "Oh, the Warped Tour is not what it used to be." I go, "Well, how old did you just turn 30? Just turned 28? Yeah, it's not for you anymore. Sorry, it's okay. But you know what? Those bands are singing the same way that A Fear sang to me, or the Dead Kennedys sang to me. They're singing to those people the same way that the Used sang to that generation 10 years ago, or Taking Back Sunday, or those bands." What's wrong? Pierce the Veil is singing, or Day to Remember, or these bands are singing the same way, or Sleeping with Sirens are singing the same way and touching those people the same way. So don't judge it. You know, it's not for me. I'm not driving down the road necessarily listening to this music all the time. I appreciate it for what it is and who it's appealing to. And if I could take it to a wider audience, which I think we've done, in a nice way. I think Warped Tour, genuinely, it was weird. My wife goes, at first when I started Warped Tour, she goes, "This is crazy." She's an old punk girl, so it's like, "You took all the danger out of punk rock." And I go, "Yeah, because 90% of the problems were covered under 10% of the darkness, by 10% of the people in darkness." I said, "What's wrong with bringing this music out so people can actually listen to it and not worried about getting their asses kicked?" So, yeah, I think I brought it there, and now, you know, that goes back to maybe being that person who wanted to be a teacher, maybe in some ways, or maybe moving in that direction. I think Warped Tour has become a large classroom. If you look at it, we do 500,000 students a year. They come to school one day a year. Festivals aren't looked at school, but they come in. They think from the minute they walk in, they have to decide who they're going to go see. They have to see how their day is going to roll. They have exposed to a lot of nonprofits. They're the brands that they maybe what inspires them to. How many kids have come to Warped Tour and been inspired to start their own clothing company, their jewelry companies? But, you know, like any school, 90% of the people are just kind of going. and they're there to have a great day in the sun and listen to some music. But 10% of those people are actually overachievers, and the next thing I know, they're calling me, they've started a nonprofit, they've started a band, they've started a brand, and that's cool because, you know, they go back into their communities, and when I get a letter, you know, sometimes you read about the negative. Some of the things that come out are very small and negative. And I just came from a crisis management thing, totally unrelated to this, just learning about something else that's going on, totally out of the music space. And it's like I now can see, and I go, they grab onto a few things. But if you really look, I'd tell anyone, I'd be willing to sit with almost anyone and stack up what we've done to make the world a little better place. We can't fix everyone's problems compared to almost anyone out there at this point. And yeah, you're going to get a little bit, you know, you've got to dwell on it. Like, I don't know, I said today at this thing, and I speak a different way. This was all businessmen and things, and I go, look, it's one of those things that, you know, you get run over by a bus enough, you grow a thick back. You know, it's, you know, people grab onto little things, and last year, you know, you realize you just got to keep moving forward. If you have a mission or something you want to do in life, just keep moving forward. So when I get a note from a kid that says, I did a show and the entry was 3 cans of food, that's what they learn at Warped Tour, our canned food drive that does 460,000 pounds of food collected at the front gates. Those kids are taking it back into their community, and they had a basement party in the middle of December, and the entry was a case of water. I got one of those. And their money, the water was going to go to Flint, Michigan. You know, that's what you want to leave this world with. Do we run a big flag all the time about it and say all the things we do? We haven't, but sometimes you have to talk about it more. I think we talk about it more, what we're doing in the community, the blood drives, you know. We helped fix that problem. You know, we didn't, you know, 60,000 pints of blood a year getting donated helped fix that shortage in blood banks during that June, July when people were on vacations. I have the term double barrel shotgun. My wife hates it, really, double barrel shotgun. And I said, yeah, we're just coming in. Like the 22nd of March, we're going to come at you. You're going to see a lot of the old school Warped Tour bands coming. Not as old as No Effects and Pennywise, because I'd be burying them in shallow graves and parking lots, because it's way too hard a tour for that age of band. It really is. And it'll be that kind of, I think the big pop punk era is going to be really popular this year. You know, and I watch and listen, and people can laugh about 5 Seconds of Summer and a lot of old punks. But you know what? They start talking about bands that they loved, Good Charlotte and Sum 41 and Simple Plan. And when they talked about it, they got the ear of all the 15, 16-year-old kids who are like, who are they? And all those bands right now, I think we're going to see a big, so you'll see a lot of those bands out there this year. You're going to see the new pop punk era bands, you know, the Story So Far. That's the era that looks up to Sum 41 and these bands. Of course, we're going to have like the Die Hards, and then we're going to have 2 monster stages this year. 2 double barrel shotgun, A View of Metal.